Hello and welcome to Wrestling Trope Alert, the channel where we analyze professional wrestling. If this is your first time here, help the channel by clicking the subscribe button. Today we are going back to 2005 and we are going to talk about the rivalry between the late great Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. Eddie and Rey's careers mirror each other. Both wrestlers come from wrestling families and both wrestlers went through ECW and WCW where they were mainly mid-card, underrated wrestlers. And eventually their paths would lead them to the WWE, with Eddie joining in 2000 and Rey Mysterio 2 years later in 2002. Eddie Guerrero finally came into his own in 2004. Eddie conquered both his demons and the Beast Brock Lesnar, and Eddie enjoyed the title run with the World Heavyweight title. And after a lengthy feud with JBL that saw Eddie drop the title to the loudmouth Texan, Eddie was left in limbo with no real direction, and at the same time Rey Mysterio was going through the same. Both wrestlers would then be assigned to the crumbling SmackDown tag team scene, and at this point both Eddie and Rey were already established tag team champions, with Eddie having won the tag team titles with Tajiri and his nephew Chavo Guerrero, and Rey Mysterio having already won the tag team titles with Edge. By the end of 2004, Eddie was added into a makeshift tag team with Booker T to battle the team of Rey Mysterio and Rob Van Dam for the tag team titles. And from the ashes of this makeshift tag team rivalry would spawn one of the most entertaining rivalries that WWE has ever produced: Eddie Guerrero vs Rey Mysterio. We pick up this story on the January 6, 2005 episode of SmackDown. Eddie Guerrero opens the show appearing in the sweet lowrider as usual, and Eddie would play up his babyface Latino Heat persona. Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio, who was one half of the tag team champions with Rob Van Dam, would battle it out in a long drawn out match. Both wrestlers don't really show animosity towards one another, and their real life friendship transpired into the ring in this show of good sportsmanship between the two wrestlers. But this is the moment that changed the course of the story. In the ending moments of the match, after a Frankensteiner attempt by Rey Mysterio on Eddie, Eddie would hold on to the rope and deliver a sunset flip on Rey, but Rey would dropkick Eddie into a near fall. Eddie would then throw Rey into the corner. Off the corner comes Rey, and Rey goes flying towards the referee Brian Hebner, and the usual Eddie Guerrero shenanigans would ensue. Eddie would smile to the crowd, and Eddie would grab Rey Mysterio's tag team title, and Eddie would plant the title on Rey Mysterio, and then Eddie would attempt to wake the referee up, and Rey reacts quickly by placing the tag team title on Eddie's chest. The referee comes alive and Eddie attempts to hide the title with his body, and Eddie would start to crawl towards the edge of the ring to dispose of the title. Eddie denies any wrongdoing but gets caught red-handed with the title in his hands. Rey laughs, the referee is now confused, and Hebner threatens to disqualify Eddie, and as Hebner leaves the ring to store away the title, conveniently Eddie is laying on the second rope. Rey goes for the 619, Rey misses, small package, Rey rolls through, and Rey pins Eddie Guerrero and wins his match. On the following SmackDown, the WWE Tag Team titles would be defended. Rob Van Dam had sustained a very serious injury on his knee, and the titles would have to be switched so Rob Van Dam could be written off the storyline. Side note, this is the same injury that would cause Rob Van Dam to not wrestle at the returning ECW pay-per-view One Night Stand later in June, something that would cause tremendous disappointment in Rob Van Dam, especially because the whole rebirth of ECW by form of a one-off pay-per-view was Rob Van Dam's idea in the first place. In a fatal 4-way tag team match, Mysterio and Rob Van Dam would wrestle Eddie Guerrero and Booker T, Luther Reigns and Mark Jindrak, and JBL's lackeys the Basham brothers. And the Basham brothers would powerbomb Rey Mysterio and become the new WWE Tag Team Champions. On the next SmackDown broadcast, Teddy Long would be in the ring to announce the tag team match between the Bashams and Booker T and Eddie Guerrero. After attempting to hit Eddy with the title, Eddy would capitalize and Nick Patrick, the NWO referee, would catch Eddy red-handed, and the Bashams would retain their brand new titles by disqualification. Eddy and Booker T would lose the match and have a disagreement in the ring, and after Eddy leaves, Danny Basham and the other JBL lackey Orlando Jordan would both rush Booker T, and Eddy would return to the aid of his tag team partner Booker T, and after a spinneroonie by Booker T, Eddy would give a frog splash to Orlando Jordan. On the next SmackDown broadcast, 3 days before the 2005 Royal Rumble pay-per-view, Eddie Guerrero would be in a 6-man tag team match with his partner Booker T and Rey Mysterio, against the lackeys of both JBL and Kurt Angle. Orlando Jordan, the man who wrestled the Ultimate Warrior's last match later in 2008, Mark Jindrak, who almost became part of Evolution, and Roman Reigns' older cousin Luther Reigns. Not really, but they do share the same kayfabe last name, and knowing the WWE, that's a storyline just waiting to happen. The babyface team would win this match with a frog splash from Eddie Guerrero on Mark Jindrak, and 30 minutes later, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio and Booker T would be in a backstage segment selling the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. In this segment, Eddie talks about winning the Royal Rumble, and Eddie would try to enlist the help of Mysterio and Booker in the Rumble match.
Working as one unit for the greater purpose of victory!
Both Rey Mysterio and Booker T laugh him out of the building. Cause Booker T and Rey know that they can't trust the master of the shenanigans, lie, cheat and steal, Eddie Guerrero. Ahead of the 2005 Royal Rumble match, Eddie Guerrero would be in 2 backstage segments. Eddie Guerrero, along with the Nature Boy Ric Flair, are picking their Rumble entrance numbers, under the watchful supervision of the authority figures SmackDown's General Manager Teddy Long and Raw's General Manager Eric Bischoff, the Karate Man.
Let me tell you about a man who rides side by side with justice. Eric Bischoff, Karate Man. He's an artist with his fist and the canvas is your face.
Christy Hemme and Tori Wilson are on spin duty, and both Flair and Eddie would draw their numbers. Flair shows excitement about the number he has drawn, and Eddie not so much. Eddie would then hug the Nature Boy, and Eddie would lie, cheat and steal both Flair's number and Flair's wallet.
Guerrero stole my number!
Side note, this choosing of the numbers via random lottery really added to the Rumble match. The stories that could be told with this seemingly small and insignificant segment are endless, and it's a shame that the WWE doesn't do this anymore. 25 minutes later, in the second backstage segment of Eddie Guerrero, Theodore Long would be pressing Eddie Guerrero about his earlier actions, and the remaining members of Evolution would show up to attempt to resolve this issue. Teddy Long would convince Eddie to give the number back to Flair, and even Flair's wallet that Flair hadn't even realized it was missing.
This is such good
1 hour and a half later, Eddie's entrance number would be revealed, and Eddie would draw the shortest straw and enter number 1 in his sweet custom lowrider. Benoit would join him in the number 2 spot, and moments later the Tough Enough contestant winner Daniel Puder would enter the Rumble match. Side note, earlier in 2004, the WWE had moved their long-running talent scout show, Tough Enough, into the SmackDown's weekly broadcasts, and during the fall of 2004, the contestants would compete in ever-increasing awful segments. This is how Ryback and The Miz got their start in the WWE. They participated in the Tough Enough competition that MMA fighter Daniel Puder would eventually win. It was during this competition 2 months earlier that Daniel Puder almost embarrassed the Olympic hero Kurt Angle by almost making Angle tap and almost breaking Kurt Angle's arm. I made a video talking about this terrible yet hilarious season of Tough Enough.
Justice, why do you think that you were eliminated tonight?
Probably lack of votes.
It's a train wreck that features some of the worst booking moments for new and upcoming stars. Links are in the description. Puder is going to enter the ring to join the highly believable and highly skilled workers Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit. Puder cuts a promo outside the ring, Puder then enters the ring, and the veterans proceed to knife headshot Puder.
He doesn't have any. Oh, he's gonna pick his spots. Teamwork. Confidence. Look at his way.
Puder almost dies in a back suplex. Guerrero gives the three amigos to Puder, and then Hardcore Holly would make his entrance at number 4. Side note, Hardcore Holly is infamous for his treatment of tough enough contestants, and Holly had mistreated Matt Cappotelli in a previous season of Tough Enough. Hardcore Holly was the #1 enemy of all the Tough Enough contestants, and Holly would make the pain train continue on Daniel Puder.
Puder's like, oh! And this every.
Daniel Puder would be eliminated from the Royal Rumble as Hurricane Helms is making his Rumble entrance, and this would be the end of Daniel Puder's career for the WWE. The Rumble match would go on, and future foe Rey Mysterio would make his entrance at number 9. Rey would eliminate Kenzo Suzuki and get a tilt-a-whirl backbreaker from his friend Eddie Guerrero. 5 minutes later, Booker T celebrates eliminating Roman's cousin Luther with the Spinneroonie, and his then tag team partner Eddie Guerrero would eliminate Booker T. And then after Rey Mysterio takes out Eddie face first into the canvas, Edge would eliminate Eddie Guerrero, and Eddie would then be out of the Royal Rumble. Eddie's future foe Rey Mysterio would be one of the 4 last remaining wrestlers in the Royal Rumble match, and Rey Mysterio would be speared by Edge and be knocked out of the Rumble match. This is the Rumble match that saw John Cena and Batista eliminate each other simultaneously, which led to Vince McMahon jumping out of his chair in the gorilla position and sprint to the ring to attempt to resolve this issue, and probably because he had been sitting for around 3 hours prior to this, without any kind of warm-up, Vince McMahon's 59-year-old muscles and tendons just snapped, and when he entered the ring, Vince McMahon would tear both his quad muscles simultaneously. The same injury that had plagued Triple H 4 years earlier, but on 2 legs instead of 1. Vince McMahon in excruciating pain would dictate the solution for this major screw-up. The Rumble match would be restarted, Cena would be to the outside, and Batista would win the Royal Rumble match, and Batista would go on to the WrestleMania 21 main event, and Batista would win the World Heavyweight Championship from Triple H, but that's a story for another day. After the Royal Rumble pay-per-view, the cards would be reshuffled, and the search would begin for a new #1 contender for the championship title that JBL had been holding for over 200 years. The upper card of the SmackDown roster would wrestle each other in a series of matches, and future Eddie Guerrero foe Rey Mysterio would win a match against Martin Drag. And 45 minutes later, Booker T and Eddie Guerrero would be in a backstage segment. Booker T is angry because Eddie eliminated Booker T from the Royal Rumble, and Booker T and Eddie's makeshift tag team finally ends, and both men vow to win the match for the #1 contendership. 5 minutes later, Eddie and Booker T would go toe-to-toe with each other, and after Eddie Guerrero gives the 1, 2, 3 amigos to Booker T, Eddie would climb the ropes to deliver his frog splash. Booker T would roll out of the way, Booker T would do his trademark Spinneroonie, vintage scissor kick by Booker T that lands square on the face of evil NWO referee Nick Patrick. The referee is down, and Booker T manages to land the scissor kick on Eddie, but the referee is absent for the count. Eventually, the referee would recover from his kayfabe comatose state, and Nick Patrick would count the cover, but Eddie would kick out. Again, the referee would be taken out, and Eddie fakes a knee injury, trying to deceive Booker T. Booker T goes to check on Eddie, and Eddie again falls to the mat. Booker T is watching Eddie in the arena Titantron, and is not falling for Eddie Guerrero's act. Eddie kicks Booker T in the gut, Booker T reverses a suplex from Eddie, Booker T rolls Eddie, and Booker T, with a handful of tights, wins this match and advances in the #1 contenders tournament. The following SmackDown broadcast would be special. For the first time ever, the WWE would air their shows Raw and SmackDown from the land of the rising sun, Japan. In this special episode of SmackDown, Eddy would battle Japanese-born superstar Kenzo Suzuki, and Eddie Guerrero would delight the Japanese fans with 1, 2, 3 amigos, followed by a frog splash and a pinfall for the win, bringing joy for the fans in the Saitama Super Arena. Rey Mysterio would also be in action in this Japanese episode of SmackDown, and ahead of his match with Kurt Angle for the #1 contender spot, Angle and Mysterio would be in a backstage segment, where Rey Mysterio vows to win the match, but unfortunately Vince McMahon would have other plans, and Kurt Angle would win clean in the middle of the ring, and Angle would advance in the #1 contenders tournament. On the next SmackDown broadcast, Rey Mysterio is scheduled to wrestle one half of JB Azleki's Doug Basham, and ahead of the match, Rey Mysterio would cut a promo talking about how Rey Mysterio was the tag team champion until the Bashams took out his partner Rob Van Dam weeks earlier. And then Rey Mysterio announces that Rey and his new partner Eddie Guerrero will wrestle for the tag team titles at the No Way Out pay-per-view 3 days later. This is just bad booking. A makeshift tag team with no track record is challenging the tag team champions because logic. Typical lazy WWE booking.
Every week you're trying to come up with something different and something new.
All of this could have been resolved by having Theodore Long, SmackDown general manager, announce that because of their constant dastardly deeds, the Bashams would put their title on the line at the pay-per-view against the winner of a mini tournament. Then you could have all SmackDown current tag teams compete against each other in a total of 3 matches during the broadcast. One of these matches would be left unfilled and a tag team would be necessary to compete. And in a backstage segment, Eddie and Rey could talk to each other about joining forces and rising from the ashes of their previous tag teams. Then they would talk to Teddy Long, who would deny them the opportunity at first. And because both Eddie and Rey have established tag team experience, Rey and Eddie would manage to convince the SmackDown general manager of their worth.
Now seems to me that you two want to drop it like it's hot.
Teddy Long would eventually add Rey and Eddie to the mini tournament. Rey and Eddie would win the tournament and go on to the No Way Out pay-per-view and do whatever the WWE want them to do, with a solid story behind them. Two friends united with a common goal, and better yet, they would have momentum, making the tag team match for the titles mean that much more. Back to the regularly scheduled programming, Rey would wrestle Doug Basham in a short match, and Rey would win that match off the distraction that Eddie Guerrero would cause. 619, drop of the dime, and pinfall for the win. At the No Way Out pay-per-view, Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero would open the show to wrestle for the tag team titles, and Baby Hebner, Brian Hebner, would officiate this match. And in true Viva la Raza fashion, Eddie Guerrero would try to lie, cheat and steal, but his partner Rey Mysterio at first wouldn't let him. And in the ending moments of the match, after a failed frog splash, Eddie would pretend to be hurt in plain view of the referee. A dazed Doug Basham then gets small packaged into a near fall. Danny Basham would then toss one of the titles to his partner Doug, and as Brian Hebner is disposing of the title, Rey Mysterio would fall into the lie, cheat and steal ways of Eddie Guerrero. Eddie then hits Doug with the title, Rey does a ring post 619 on Danny, Eddie pins Doug Basham in the middle of the ring, and new tag team champions Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. 30 minutes later, Eddie and Rey would be backstage celebrating with some of the members of the roster, and Eddie Guerrero would give a word of advice to future main eventer John Cena. Eddie warned Cena of the importance of his later match against Kurt Angle, a match that Cena would win with his finishing move, the FU, now known as the Attitude Adjustment. And Cena would go on to wrestle JBL at WrestleMania and become the new World Heavyweight Champion. After the No Way Out pay-per-view, Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio's careers would be entwined for most of the year. And in the following SmackDown, Eddie and Rey would battle the Basham brothers in a rematch for the tag team titles. And Eddie and Rey would retain their titles with a 619, frog splash, drop of the dime, and pinfall for the win. On the next SmackDown broadcast, Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio would defend their tag team titles against Marching Drag and Luther Reigns, carrying a victory with a frog splash from Eddie Guerrero, and an hour later, Rey Mysterio would be in a backstage segment with Eddie's nephew Chavo Guerrero. This is the start of Chavo Guerrero's meddling in Eddie and Rey's friendship, and over the coming weeks, Chavo Guerrero is going to heavily stir the pot and influence his uncle Eddie. In this segment, Chavo Guerrero warns Rey Mysterio of the future betrayal that could await Rey Mysterio, and knowing now what would happen later is definitely not wrong. On the following SmackDown broadcast, JBL and his crony Orlando Jordan are challenging the tag team champions because of reasons. And ahead of the match, Eddie and Rey would be backstage with Chavo Guerrero again stirring the pot. And Chavo is warning Eddie and Rey that if they lose the titles, Chavo would be the only Guerrero left to hold the title, and Grandma wouldn't want that to happen.
Your grandma wouldn't want that to happen. Grandma wouldn't want that to happen. No, she wouldn't want that to happen. Their grandma wouldn't want that to happen. Nobody's grandma would want that to happen. That's right.
30 minutes later, Eddie and Rey would make their entrance in a sweet custom lowrider. JBL and his cabinet would be next, and both teams would main event the SmackDown broadcast. And as usual, the WWE booked themselves into a corner. Eddie and Rey are the tag team champions, and if they lose, JBL and Jordan become the tag team champions. And the WWE doesn't want that. But Eddie and Rey can't pin Orlando Jordan, who is the United States champion. And because of this, Orlando Jordan must be kept strong. And for the same reason, JBL also can't lose, because in WWE booking mentality, JBL, who is the World Heavyweight Champion, must also be kept strong ahead of his WrestleMania match with John Cena. So after 15 minutes pass into the match, Orlando Jordan would find himself leaning on the second rope. Rey Mysterio goes for the 619 and JBL drops him out of the skies with a steel chair. The Bashams flood the ring, Cena shows up to even the odds, and Orlando Jordan eats an FU. Coward JBL flees to the audience, and SmackDown goes off the air. On the next SmackDown broadcast, Eddie Guerrero would have a backstage segment with his nephew Chavo, and once again, Chavo is stirring the pot. Chavo calls Eddie a disappointment to the Guerrero family. Chavo reminds Eddie of his previous WrestleMania, where Eddie wrestled and retained his World Heavyweight Championship. Chavo plants in Eddie's mind the idea that Eddie can't beat Rey Mysterio, and that's the reason that Eddie decided to tag with Rey, because if you can beat him, join them. This drives Eddie into a frenzy, and Eddie is left doubting himself as he stares in the mirror. On this week's SmackDown, Eddie and Rey would be joined by John Cena in a match against JBL and the Basham brothers in the main event of this week's SmackDown. Cena would be the focus of this 6-man tag team match, and Cena's story with JBL would permeate all through the match, and in the ending moments of the match, something interesting actually happens. Guerrero would be applying the Three Amigos, but the legal man was Rey Mysterio, and as Eddie goes to climb the corner, Rey Mysterio capitalizes by dropping the dime, and the face that Eddie makes warns us of the story that would be unfolding for the rest of the year. On the following SmackDown broadcast, Eddie is backstage with Chavo, and Eddie is tired of Chavo constantly stirring the pot between Rey and Eddie. Chavo tells Eddie that Rey is holding Eddie down. Chavo points at how Rey took advantage of Eddie's Three Amigos and stole the supposed pinfall that Eddie was working towards. Chavo then asks a tough question and leaves.
You have to prove to yourself who is better, Rey Mysterio or Eddie Guerrero.
15 minutes later, Eddie is troubled by Chavo's words, and Eddie would find Rey in a backstage locker room. Eddie Guerrero hatches a plan for a match at WrestleMania against Rey Mysterio, and Eddie proceeds to attempt to convince Rey Mysterio, and at first Rey Mysterio thinks Eddie is joking, but Eddie is serious. The challenge for now would be left unresolved, and Eddie and Rey would defend their tag team championships against yet another makeshift tag team, composed of Hardcore Holly and Charlie Haas. And easy peasy lemon squeezy, Eddie and Rey would win this match with a frog splash on Charlie Haas, and after the match, Rey Mysterio would answer Eddie's challenge.
I accept your challenge. WrestleMania 21, Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio are gonna tear the house down.
On the last SmackDown before WrestleMania, Eddie would be in a singles match with one half of the Basham brothers, Danny Basham, and during this match, the other Basham brother Doug would constantly interfere, and coming to the aid of his friend Eddie Guerrero, Rey would accidentally hit Eddie in the head, causing Eddie to be pinned by Doug Basham. After the match, Rey would apologize vociferously to Eddie Guerrero, and 15 minutes later, in a backstage segment, Rey would continue to offer his apologies to his on-screen and off-screen friend Eddie Guerrero. Eddie accepts Rey's apology, and Eddie vows to be there for Rey Mysterio, when Rey Mysterio wrestles the other Basham brother Doug later on the broadcast. 30 minutes later, Eddie Guerrero would accompany Rey Mysterio to the ring for his match. Eddie would be ringside for the duration of the match, keeping a careful eye on Doug Basham, who is also outside the ring. And after Rey Mysterio delivers his 619 on Danny Basham, Rey, for some reason, would attempt to climb the corner, instead of doing his usual drop of the dime or West Coast pop. Doug Basham would climb the ropes to interfere, and Eddie, attempting to scare Doug away, would cause Rey Mysterio to go balls first into the corner turnbuckle.
What? Oh no!
Danny would capitalize on the mishap and pin Rey Mysterio in yet another unfortunate event, and after the match, both Eddie and Rey would make amends and hug it out, but Eddie's face would tell a very different story. At WrestleMania, Eddie Guerrero would make his entrance in his usual lowrider, and Rey Mysterio would come out next. Both men would challenge each other in the greatest stage of them all, and during this match, Eddie's fears of not being able to overcome Rey Mysterio would come to fruition, and during this match, things start to change, because Rey Mysterio takes the fight to Eddie Guerrero, and the realization that Rey Mysterio might be better than Eddie Guerrero starts to break down Eddie. In the ending moments of the match, Eddie gives a backbreaker to Rey, followed by the three amigos. Rey dodges the frog splash, and then Eddie counters Rey's seated senton into a power bomb, but Rey manages to eke out a victory with the Hurricane Rana into a roll-up and pinfall for the win. The moments after the ending of the match start to tell the great story unfolding before our very eyes.
A great show of sportsmanship.
After WrestleMania, a new #1 contender for John Cena's title must be found. JBL had lost the title to Cena, and one of the stipulations of the match was that JBL would waive the traditional wrestling trope pre-match clause. SmackDown opens with a ring segment featuring all the upper tier roster of SmackDown, and Rey Mysterio would show up to throw his name in the hat. And Eddie perceives this as a betrayal, but doesn't take any action about it at this time. As a result of this segment, the first #1 contender match would be announced. Rey Mysterio would be wrestling JBL in tonight's SmackDown broadcast. And an hour later, in a backstage segment, Eddie is promising to Rey that Eddie will make sure that Rey wins against JBL. But Eddie drops hints of doubting Rey's ability to overcome JBL.
I really don't think you can beat him alone.
Rey assures Eddie that Rey will persevere, and Rey reminds Eddie of Rey Mysterio's win over Eddie Guerrero at WrestleMania days before.
In WrestleMania, carnal, I beat you.
5 minutes later, the match takes place, and this particular SmackDown taping is being held in San Diego, which is Rey Mysterio's hometown. WWE Wrestling Trope Alert: if you are in your hometown, you will most definitely lose your match.
WWF Raw Live from Raucous, Oklahoma City.
Well, let me tell you something, JR. You're gonna kiss his ass. Get over here and kiss his ass.
Oh my gosh!
And after Rey's valiant effort against JBL and the constant interference of JBL's lackey Orlando Jordan, Eddie would cause Rey Mysterio to be disqualified. Eddie had appeared moments earlier to even the odds and take out Orlando Jordan. But then JBL kicks Eddie, Rey drop kicks JBL, 619, drop of the dime, and as Rey is covering JBL, Eddie loses his temper and breaks the pinfall attempt. Winner of this match, JBL. On the next SmackDown broadcast, Carlito Caribbean Cool is given a talk show, and Carlito does what heels do. Carlito mimics Eddie's nephew Chavo and also stirs it between Eddie and Rey.
Eddie Guerrero screwing up your first ever title shot.
In this segment, the tag team M&M would make their televised debut, and the SmackDown tag team mainstays would challenge Rey and Eddie, but Eddie is absent.
What? Oh no!
And taking advantage of Eddie's absence, M&M would attack Rey Mysterio. And 15 minutes later, in a backstage segment, Rey would be in the backstage area recovering from the beating, and Eddie would show up with the excuse of having car troubles.
I had trouble with my ride home.
Eddie then tells Rey that Eddie will dedicate his #1 contenders match later tonight with Kurt Angle to Rey, and in that main event match, after Angle puts Eddie in the ankle lock, Eddie counters into a sunset flip, and from the floor, Eddie pushes Angle strikes hard, exposing Angle's behind. Then small package and kick out at 2, ankle lock once again, and Eddie struggles but manages to counter, and Eddie sends Angle flying towards the referee, Jimmy Corderas. Angle then uses this referee distraction to procure a steel chair. Rey Mysterio shows up to deliver a seated senton on Angle, and Rey Mysterio, now with a chair in his hand, goes to check up on Eddie Guerrero. Eddie turns around, sees Mysterio with a chair, and freaks the fuck out. Angle takes this opportunity to push Rey towards Eddie. Angle pins Eddie Guerrero and advances in the #1 contenders tournament as Eddie and Rey continue their series of unfortunate events. The following SmackDown broadcast, it's now Eddie's turn to visit Carlito's cabana. Carlito does his best to stir the shit between Rey and Eddie.
Whoa. Carlito's not trying to stir up trouble.
Trying to stir it up between me and Rey.
Eddie calls Rey to attempt to explain himself, and both men would make amends and hug it out. And backstage, M&M are ruining the beautiful paint job on Eddie's lowrider. Side note, of all the lowriders that Eddie drove in his entrance, this was one of the least deserving of this treatment. M&M doing this to such a beautiful piece of art made me hate M&M, so good on the WWE for building this heat for the young team. Eddie and Rey gives chase but can't arrive in time to catch M&M at the scene of the crime.
M&M, you guys are gonna pay tonight!
Then 30 minutes later, M&M is having a match with Eddie and Rey for the tag team titles. And after a distraction by Melina, Eddie attempts to remove Melina from the ring area. And as the referee is distracted, M&M use a double team move on Mysterio, and Eddie and Rey lose the tag team championships. After the match, Eddie and Rey will be demanding explanations from each other. And Eddie eventually pushes Rey and leaves the ring. Rey doesn't take this one lying down and goes after Eddie, and Rey pushes Eddie and walks away. The seeds of hate have been planted, and now the clock is counting down to the eventual demise of Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero. And in a backstage segment, Eddie is all pumped up trying to hype Rey, but Rey is feeling the sadness. Then Rey has a heart-to-heart with Rey Mysterio, and Eddie attempts to make amends with Rey once again. Then Chavito, the soaring eagle himself, interrupts this sweet bonding moment. Eddie then accuses Chavo of also trying to stir the shit up between Rey and Eddie. Eddie then says that Mysterio is family.
We're like familia, Holmes. Órale, vato loco.
And Eddie accuses Chavo of not being there for Eddie. Eddie then promises his allegiance to Rey. Once more, Rey forgives Eddie, and Eddie and Rey make amends, but for how long? This SmackDown broadcast, Eddie and Rey are going to have a wrestling rematch against M&M, and SmackDown emanates from the United Kingdom, and in true WWE fashion, British tropes are mandatory. So WWE calls the Double Decker Bus Company, and in another unrelated match, JBL would come out in a Rolls Royce. And in their match with M&M, Eddie and Rey would make their entrance in a convertible Jaguar XKR. Eddie and Rey would have a competitive match with Eminem, and it seems that whatever was going on between Eddie and Rey has been resolved and both men work as a cohesive team throughout the match. Then by mistake, Rey crashes into Eddie, leading to Eddie falling outside of the ring. Rey carries on fighting Eminem and Rey almost wins the match single-handedly. Then Rey props Mercury on the second row preparing for the 619, and Rey notices that Eddie is halfway down the ramp. This gives Eminem enough time to recover. Nitro delivers a powerbomb on Rey, crooked referee Nick Patrick counts, Rey kicks out, and then Eddie starts to come to his senses and makes his way back to the ring in a great moment of storytelling. Later in the match, Rey continues to persevere against Eminem and Eddie is in the corner looking somber for quite some time. Then Rey does his patented tilt-a-whirl at scissors and starts to crawl towards Eddie for the tag. Rey reaches for Eddie as hard as he can and Eddie is just motionless staring at Rey Mysterio. Eddie's eyes piercing Mysterio's soul with the content of betrayal. A wary Mercury drops an elbow on Rey, Eminem does their finishing move, pinfall for the win, and Eminem retains their championship. After the match and still in the corner, Eddie admires as Rey gets further destroyed by Eminem. Eddie stares at Mysterio suffering in agony on the floor, and Eddie turns his back on Mysterio.
This is such good.
On the next SmackDown broadcast, Rey Mysterio comes out to address Eddie Guerrero's actions, and Rey calls Eddie a liar and a coward. Then Rey dares Eddie to come out and face Rey Mysterio. Eddie comes out in silence with no entrance music, walking slowly to the ring area staring daggers at Rey Mysterio. Eddie gets in the ring and both men hold their distance in the ring. Rey closes the distance gap, which makes Eddie uncomfortable, and Eddie tells Rey that Eddie has nothing to say.
I have nothing to say to you, Holmes.
Rey Mysterio is feeling the betrayal of his beloved friend as he asks Eddie what happened to family.
What happened to you are my familia?
Eventually, Rey gets tired of Eddie's silent treatment and Rey takes action by pushing Eddie. Eddie then walks slowly towards Rey.
I've never laid a hand on you the way you just did to me.
Rey then tells Eddie that he didn't need to, because Eminem did the dirty work for Eddie, and then Rey slaps Eddie in the face. Side note, this is where the lines get blurred. From a heel babyface standpoint, this is going too far for Rey, who is the babyface in this situation. Pushing Eddie works because Rey is showing that he's not a pushover. Slapping another man and starting the fight may be perceived by the audience as a heelish move, because Eddie just takes it and doesn't fight back. This is problematic within the WWE storytelling, as the WWE struggles to book babyfaces constantly.
Suck up, sellout, full of suffering, succotash, son!
The big dog!
Real mature.
Rey Mysterio is now in a fighting stance, and Eddie says that he will not fight Rey, and Eddie turns his back on Rey as if to paint a target for Rey to strike. Eddie decides to leave as Rey continues to instigate. Eddie would stop mid-ramp, teasing a return to the ring, but would eventually leave. 15 minutes later, Rey Mysterio is in Teddy Long's office, the greatest general manager ever, and Rey wants to settle the score with Eddie, and Rey wants a match. Chavo Guerrero shows up to ask what the fuck is going on, and proceeds to defend his uncle Eddie, and a brawl ensues. Teddy Long would make a match with a street fight stipulation between Rey and Chavo for the main event of this SmackDown broadcast. Side note, this is also a wrestling trope alert moment. Every time a wrestler has storyline associates, those associates always have to wrestle against whoever their storyline friend is feuding with. Ahead of the street fight, Chavo Guerrero would have two backstage segments. Chavo enrolls the help of Eminem for later tonight, and the second one where Chavo speaks to his uncle Eddie, promising to punish Rey Mysterio in the street fight. And 5 minutes later, Chavo makes his entrance and Rey shows up with a steel pipe. And he brings the steel pipe because earlier in the broadcast, Rey went after Eminem with this steel pipe. Again, the WWE fails at booking a babyface wrestler like Rey Mysterio. The people want Rey to win matches with his skills and wits. Rey going after Eminem with a steel pipe and Rey carrying a pipe to wrestle Chavo Guerrero only tells the audience that he's not good enough to beat Chavo fair and square. Granted, the match with Chavo will be a street fight and furniture is probably getting used, but the bad guy appearing empty-handed and the babyface bringing a weapon is just logic. Rey would soon get rid of the pipe and both men would have a competitive fight for quite some time. Then later in the match, after Rey goes balls first into the corner turnbuckle, Chavo props up a chair and drives Rey Mysterio's head straight into the chair. Then a gaudy bomb on Rey Mysterio followed by a near fall and Eminem would show up to help Chavo by holding a ladder, which Rey Mysterio kicks and takes down Eminem. Chavo would set up the chair once again in the middle of the ring. Rey counters and Chavo goes face first into the chair. And as Chavo is seated on the chair, Rey with a seated senton on Chavo, who is sitting. Seatedception. Pinfall for the win, and after the match, Eminem and Chavo go to work on Rey Mysterio. Eddy would swerve the audience and show up to take out Eminem and stare down Rey. Eddy embraces Rey and moments later Eddy turns on Rey and Eddy gives a vicious beating to his former friend all the way outside. Rey hits the ring post and back in the ring Rey Mysterio's destroyed mask is filled with the crimson mist and Eddy continues his onslaught of violence with the steel steps and SmackDown ends with Rey Mysterio's body lying motionless on the cold arena floor.
This is such good
Rey Mysterio would miss the next two SmackDown broadcasts to further sell the injuries sustained at the hands of Eddie Guerrero. On this episode of SmackDown, Eddie Guerrero enters the arena in street clothes, playing his role to perfection with his heel somber look. Eddie goes for a share at ringside and grabs a microphone. Eddie cuts a promo explaining his actions while being showered by boos from the paying audience.
I gave him what he wanted.
Eddie reaches for Rey's broken mask as he proclaims that all this mayhem, pain and suffering is all Rey Mysterio's fault.
It's your fault! Rey, why'd you make me do it? ¿Por qué? Do you think that makes me happy? Es tu culpa, Rey!
Eddie then turns his attentions to the fans and Eddie accuses the fans of stealing Eddie's passion and Eddie's Latino heat. And after that, Eddie warns Rey Mysterio of the impending consequences of Eddie's wrath.
Think of your family. Don't make me hurt their daddy again.
And 45 minutes later, Eddie would be in a match with independent wrestler Jimmy Jacobs, of Ring of Honor and Impact Wrestling fame, and also former PWG Tag Team Champion with Seth Rollins. Eddie would place Rey's mask on the ring post and proceed to dismantle poor young Jimmy Jacobs, and then Eddie would take Rey's mask and put it on Jimmy's face and give the beating of a lifetime to poor Jimmy, and eventually Eddie would be disqualified for giving a brainbuster on the chair to poor Jimmy.
This is such good
On the last SmackDown before Judgment Day, Eddie would prove that not saying anything sometimes says a lot. Eddie stands in the ring for quite some time in a display of tremendous acting, and this segment would end with Eddie crushing Mysterio's mask under his cowboy boots, and Eddie walking off without saying a word. Eddie comes out of the gorilla position with his somber look, staring down the fans as he enters the ring. Rey Mysterio comes out next with kayfabe bandages typical of babyfaces selling injuries, firmly painting a target squared at the very body part that he wants to protect. Rey takes a prayer in the corner, his back turned to Eddie, begging Eddie to strike him from behind. Rey turns and surprises Eddie. Eddy takes the first shot and the violence ensues onto the corner, and Eddy has the upper hand. Knife-edge chops, punches, and an Irish whip into the ropes. Rey takes out Eddy with a shoulder tackle, Rey punishes Eddy, and the referee stops the offense, and Eddy leaves the ring to recover from the beating. Rey gives chase to Eddy capitalizes and drives Rey into the steel steps, calling back to weeks back when Mysterio was driven back first into the steel steps. Eddy continues his onslaught on Rey. Rey hits the ring post, Rey gets a spinebuster on the announce desk twice, and the referee Brian Hebner warns Eddy of the impending timeout. And back in the ring, Eddy kicks Rey once again as Brian Hebner warns Eddy again. Rey struggles to stay in this match but somehow manages to kick out a 2. Back suplex by Eddy hard on the canvas, another near fall, and Rey gets stretched by Eddy. Rey manages to arm drag Eddy, and now Rey attempts to gain momentum, but Eddy catches Rey and delivers an inverted powerbomb. Another near fall, but still Rey kicks out in a remarkable display of fighting spirit. Eddy removes the bandages from Mysterio's gut and throws them at the referee. Rey attempts a comeback with some stiff elbows, but is not enough as Eddy continues to dominate Rey Mysterio. Later in the match, Rey is in a submission hold and Rey struggles through his pain and manages to reach for the ropes. The referee stops the count and Eddy sends Mysterio flying all the way outside. Eddy drags Rey and Rey manages to counter. Rey sends Eddy's back straight into the ring post, and as Eddy sells the ring post, 619 off the ring post, and back in the ring, the action goes. Both men exhausted trade blows, Eddy channels his Latino hit persona and Rey channels his remaining powers and takes the fight to Eddie Guerrero. Springboard crossbody, near fall, spinning kick, seated senton, another near fall. Mysterio punches Eddy in the corner, Irish whip, Mysterio goes flying towards Eddy, Eddy dodges and Mysterio goes shoulder first into the ring post. Eddy lifts Mysterio to the top of the ropes, superplex from the top rope, pinfall attempt as Mysterio continues to kick out. Eddie Guerrero then goes for his signature offense, the Three Amigos. Rey counters the third amigo and sends Eddy flying towards the second rope, teasing the 619. And because this rivalry is supposed to go on for a long time, Chavo Guerrero shows up to interfere, and Chavo is here to distract the referee. Eddy procures a steel chair but fails to capitalize because Rey dropkicks Eddy's knee. Drop toe hold on Eddy, baseball slide on Chavo, 619 on Eddy, Mysterio attempts to drop the dime, and Eddy with the chair drops Mysterio from the skies down to the floor. Match ends by disqualification, and after the match, Eddy delivers more steel chair strikes on Rey Mysterio, solidifying his new heel persona. Eddy leaves the ring area showered in disdain by the people, and back in the ring, Rey is hurting. After the match at Judgment Day, the rivalry between Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio would continue but would cool down significantly. In a backstage segment, Rey vows to make Eddy pay for his dastardly ways, and both men would be in the Winner's Choice Battle Royale, a match where the winner has the choice to challenge any other wrestler for any match that he so desires. In the Winner's Choice Battle Royale, Eddie Guerrero would deliver some devastating chair strikes as Rey is making his entrance. The Battle Royale match carries on, the herd thins, and Eddy eliminates Scotty 2 Hotty, the master of Worm. Then with the help of Angle, out goes Hardcore Holly. Later in the match, Rey Mysterio would appear to cause damage to Eddy, and Rey would manage to eliminate Eddy from the Battle Royale and deliver a seated senton to the outside, eliminating Eddie Guerrero from the match. Rey Mysterio along with Angle would be the last two men standing, and after a hard-fought battle, Mysterio would be sent outside with an Olympic slam. On the June 2nd episode of SmackDown, only a recap would air concerning the rivalry between Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. On the following SmackDown, the WWE is gearing towards the ECW pay-per-view 3 days later on the June 12th. Benoit and Guerrero are in a backstage segment talking about their upcoming match at the ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view, a match that Eddie Guerrero would lose by submission to Benoit. Then 30 minutes later, Eddie Guerrero would interfere in a match between the Cruiserweight champion Paul London, the guy who smiled as Vince McMahon walked to his storyline doom later in 2007, and Akio, the future Asian redneck Jimmy Wang Yang. Eddie grabs a microphone from announcer Tony Chimel, and Charles Robinson,
I'm talking about little nature boy Charles Robinson, you got it?
attempts to stop Eddie from interrupting the match, but to no avail. Then Akio gets launched at Eddie, Eddie takes out Akio, London confronts Eddie, and Eddie takes out London. London comes back, gets sent to the outside again, and still, London is not happy, and here comes London again, and for the third time, all the way outside goes Paul London. Eddie tells the people that he's being disrespected by his fellow wrestlers, because no one thinks that he can beat Rey Mysterio.
Because all of you don't think that I can beat Rey Mysterio.
Then Eddie cuts a promo talking about the pain and suffering that Eddie has caused Rey. Eddie also mentions a promise that he made to Rey.
I never make a promise I can't keep.
On the other side of this rivalry, Rey Mysterio would be absent from this week's SmackDown, but he would be in action against Psychosis at the ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view, in a match where I kept expecting Eddie to show up and interfere, but he wouldn't. Rey Mysterio would win the match with Psychosis with a seated senton, 619, drop of the dime, and pinfall for the win. Rey would also be in action in the main event ECW vs WWE Brawl, starring Steve Austin. Rey Mysterio would deliver a 619 to his former WCW boss Eric Bischoff and drink some beer with the boys while wearing JBL's cowboy hat. Side note, Eric Bischoff is the man who convinced Rey Mysterio to remove his mask under threat of dismissal years prior in WCW, so this segment is kind of a revenge on Eric by Rey. Hooray for continuity! On the next SmackDown, Eddie comes out with his usual heel somber look and Eddie is wrestling the Cruiserweight champion Paul London. In this match, London would actually have some offense in the beginning stages of the match, but after a powerbomb in the corner, Eddie would dominate London, then Eddie would tease the frog splash to piss the people off, and Eddie Guerrero would win this match against London with the Texas Cloverleaf. After the match, Rey would appear to punish Eddie with a steel chair, then a brawl would break out and both men would fight all the way up the ramp, with the WWE officials attempting to stop them from fighting, but failing to do so, because after SmackDown returns from commercial break in the parking lot area, Rey and Eddie would be destroying each other inside a production trailer. Then Rey would attempt to seal himself inside with Eddie, and Eddie would get away just in the nick of time, and Rey would be left inside with a couple of officials. This causes Teddy Long to make the match for the following week, Eddie Guerrero vs Rey Mysterio, to finally put his rivalry to rest. Spoiler alert, it wouldn't. On the following SmackDown, Rey talks backstage about the events of the last week and the feelings of rage he has towards Eddie. Rey says that Eddie broke Rey, and Rey says that he's not going in the match later tonight for redemption. And moments later, Eddie would be interviewed, and Eddie promises a word of hurt on Rey and a swift defeat. Later in the broadcast, Eddie would make his entrance, face enshrined in his heel somber look, and Rey, who wears a mask, also conveys the same eerie expression on his face, with both men portraying their role down to a T. And after the initial pacing back and forth between Eddie and Rey, both men would be matching each other step by step, with Eddie shocked that Rey is keeping up with Eddie, continuing the thread of the story so far, and the source of Eddie's frustrations, the realization that Eddie Guerrero can't beat Rey Mysterio. This methodical match, typical of this era's SmackDown, was a match to further the story and take up time on SmackDown. And in the closing moments of the match, Rey would reverse a powerbomb attempt by Eddie, 619, Rey drops the dime, pinfall for the win, and Rey Mysterio pins Eddie Guerrero clean in the middle of the ring. Once again, Eddie Guerrero couldn't beat his former friend, and that would be the catalyst for the next step in this story. This new chapter in the story would start in the June 30th, 2005 episode of SmackDown. Eddie, who hasn't been able to beat his former friend and current foe Rey Mysterio, is in a backstage segment being interviewed, and Eddie finally snaps and decides to find a different way to win over Rey Mysterio. Eddie tells the interviewer Josh Matthews that Rey will beg Eddie not to tell the truth.
Rey Mysterio begged me not to tell the truth.
And 10 minutes later, Eddie would make his entrance and cut a promo. And in this promo, Eddie shows a video package of Eddie at Rey Mysterio's son Dominic daycare. Eddie speaks to Dominic, the son of Rey Mysterio, about secrets.
Do you like secrets?
I love secrets.
Oh man.
And then Eddie gives some candy to Dominic in a deeply uncomfortable segment designed to intimidate Rey by going after Rey Mysterio's family. In this segment, Eddie promises Mysterio's son Dominic a bedtime story that he will never forget. And after the video package, Eddie calls out Rey, and Eddie asks the audience if the secret should be revealed. Angry Rey Mysterio shows up, and Rey pleads with Eddie to stop this madness. Eddie antagonizes Rey, and Rey manages to keep his cool. Rey then drops to his knees, pleading Eddie not to reveal this secret. Then the heel Eddie Guerrero grabs some candy similar to the ones he gave Dominic earlier, and Eddie shoves the candy in Rey Mysterio's face. Eddie leaves the ring area, and Rey Mysterio is left behind, in shock. On the following SmackDown broadcast, Rey and Eddie have a tag team match against M&M, and ahead of their match, Eddie and Rey are in a backstage segment, and Eddie is blackmailing Rey with this yet unknown secret, and Rey Mysterio has no choice but to go along with Eddie's devious ways. 20 minutes later, Eddie comes out, somber Rey follows. The tag team champions M&M are already in the ring, and throughout this match, Eddie would play mind games with Rey.
Again, the quickness of Mysterio, but think of Dominic.
And in the ending moments of this match, Eddie would hit his signature frog splash, Eddie would break the pinfall himself by lifting the head of his opponent, and Eddie would give the pinfall to Rey Mysterio. Rey gets in the ring, and given time to recover, Mercury kicks out a 2. Rey goes on the offense as Eddie cheers for Rey, but as Rey goes for the 619, Eddie grabs Rey, and Rey falls hard on the canvas. Eddie would then abandon his corner, procure a steel chair, and Eddie would sit down watching the match as Rey gets annihilated by M&M. Rey manages to hang with M&M, and Rey turns the tides of the match and eventually manages to drop the dime on Morrison, and the deranged Eddie Guerrero shows up to kick and stomp Rey Mysterio, and then watching from his corner again as M&M pins Eddie's tag team partner Rey Mysterio. After the match, Eddie would cut a promo asking Rey if he's hurt, and Rey wants to fight back but he can't, because Eddie continues to hold this secret hostage over Rey Mysterio. Rey then tries to leave, but Eddie doesn't let him. Then Eddie Guerrero slaps Rey Mysterio, and Eddie orders Rey to hold the ropes for Eddie. Rey complies, and Eddie leaves the ring as Rey looks on, seething in anger. On the next SmackDown episode, Eddie makes his entrance with his somber look of disdain, entering the ring, eyeballing the paying audience. Eddie cuts a promo talking about Rey's absence in this SmackDown broadcast.
So Rey Mysterio's not gonna be here tonight, is he?
Eddie Guerrero is in control of Rey Mysterio because Eddie knows a secret that Rey doesn't want to share with the world.
I can make you do whatever I want!
Eddie then says that Rey's absence leads him to the realization that Eddie must do something to make up for Rey's absence. Then Eddie starts to tease telling Rey Mysterio's secret. Then Eddie directs his promo to Rey's son Dominic, and Eddie through the television tells Dominic that Eddie loves him.
Hi Dominic, remember Uncle Eddie loves you!
Eddie then intimidates the announcer Tony Schimmel to supply him with a share. Eddie proceeds to tell the first chapter of Eddie's bedtime story.
Once upon a time, in a land far away.
Eddie's story would get short by the appearance of Eddie's family, Vicky Guerrero and Eddie's daughters, Sherilyn and Shaul Guerrero. Vicky tries to plea with her husband, and Vicky steals Eddie's microphone away, and Vicky tries her best to bring Eddie to reason.
I and I here to calm you down, to help you understand that this is getting out of hand.
Eddie grabs his wife and forcefully brings her backstage. And moments later in the backstage area, Vicky and Eddie argue in front of everyone. And as Eddie is leading his family to a car for them to leave, Hardcore Holly, the tough enough contestant's favorite wrestler, shows up to attempt to cool down Eddie Guerrero. Eddie feigns calming down and pushes Holly. Then Holly pushes back and Eddie says goodbye to his kids, the Guerrero family leaves, and now Eddie has some unfinished business with Hardcore Holly. 20 minutes later, Eddie would be in a match with Hardcore Holly, and in this match both wrestlers would light each other up with thunderous knife-edge chops. Eddie would win this match by poking the referee Charles Robinson in the eye and taking advantage of the situation. Eddie would drive Holly into the announce desk back first. Eddie would then source a steel pipe from under the ring. Eddie would tell the people that he's the law, Texas Cloverleaf, and Holly taps. After the match, Eddie would cut a promo directed at his wife Vicky, apologizing for his actions earlier, and Eddie would tell Vicky that he loves her and his kids. Eddie then says that he will give Rey the opportunity to keep his secret. And in order to do that, Rey Mysterio has to beat Eddie Guerrero. But if Eddie wins, Eddie gets to finish this bedtime story to Dominic. On the following SmackDown broadcast, Rey Mysterio is opening the show wrestling Super Crazy of the Mexicool. Rey would have a competitive match with Super Crazy, and in the middle of the match, Eddie would show up to guest commentate. Wrestling trope alert: in every long and extended rivalry, at some point one of the wrestlers in the rivalry will be wrestling someone else, then the other wrestler will guest commentate and more often than not interfere in the match. Eddie is confident of his win later at the Great American Bash, and Taz, who at this point is the commentator for SmackDown, grills Eddie about the secret.
Trying to find out, get some info here. But Eddie, is Rey's wife and your wife, are they related? Why don't you just shut up?
And in the ending moments of the match, Rey sends Super Crazy towards the second rope, teasing the 619. Eddie would interfere by grabbing Psychosis' rake and hitting Rey with the rake, causing Rey to win the match by disqualification. After the match, Eddie would be in a backstage segment with Teddy Long. Eddie tells Long that he's leaving, then Teddy screws Eddie Guerrero, and Teddy puts Eddie in a secret match. Spoiler alert, it's against Chris Benoit. 20 minutes later, Eddie doesn't want to wrestle Benoit and feigns leaving, and eventually after a hard-fought match, Eddie would lose the match by countout, escaping from the crossface and leaving the match altogether. Mysterio would show up for some payback on Eddie Guerrero, and Eddie would crawl back to the gorilla position while Rey would be in the grasp of the WWE officials. At the Great American Bash pay-per-view, Eddie Guerrero holds the ultimate secret over the head of both Rey Mysterio and the audience. If Eddie Guerrero wins this match, Rey Mysterio's secret will be revealed. Ahead of the match, Eddie speaks in a backstage segment. Eddie blackmailed Rey Mysterio into bringing Dominic to the Great American Bash event. Eddie wants Dominic to be present when he wins the match to hear firsthand the rest of Eddie's bedtime story. And Rey would also be shown backstage praying for protection and for a win against Eddie Guerrero. Dominic Mysterio is also shown in this segment, and Dominic is scared of what this night can bring.
Listen to me, there's nothing to be scared of. Everything's gonna be okay.
Moments later, Eddie Guerrero makes his entrance, his face carrying a burden of evilness and disdain, and the wary and cautious Rey Mysterio follows, accompanied by his 8-year-old son Dominic. Dominic sits in front of the announce desk, and Mysterio enters the ring without taking his eye from Dominic. Eddie then tells Dominic to smile as the people chant "Eddie sucks." Eddie blackmails Rey to shake his hand, showing Dominic that they are friendly. Both men embrace, and Eddie would then get clotheslined and back body dropped by Rey. Baseball slide, kick to the gut, and Rey would fail the crossbody, leading to Eddie having the upper hand in this match. A match in where both wrestlers would tell a great story in the ring, with both incorporating the young Dominic into the narrative of the match. Later in the match, Eddy would roll outside to gather his strength back, and Eddy would go to embrace Dominic, and Eddy would also then shield himself with Rey Mysterio's son. Eddy would continue to acknowledge Dominic throughout the match, as Rey valiantly fights for his son and his family. In the ending moments of the match, Rey, with the springboard dropkick, manages to send Eddy flying towards the second rope. Rey hits the 619, drop of the dime, Eddy dodges, and Eddy goes for his signature offense. 1, 2, 3 amigos. Eddy climbs the corner for the frog splash, Rey rolls out of the way, Eddy manages to give a fourth and also a fifth amigo, and Rey is down. Eddy looks at Dominic as he picks Rey Mysterio for a brainbuster, calling back to when Eddy delivered that vicious move on the steel steps weeks back. Then Eddy lands the frog splash, but takes his time covering Rey. Rey Mysterio reverses and pins Eddie Guerrero to win this match. Rey and Dominic celebrate their victory and foil the dastardly heel Eddie Guerrero's plan to reveal his secret. The story continues on the following SmackDown broadcast. Taz and Cole tell the audience that Eddy is not present, and in a backstage segment, Dominic is shown playing his PSP. Dominic asks his father about the secret, and Rey tells his son that he will tell this secret to his son when he becomes older. 2 minutes later, Rey and his son Dominic make their entrance, and Rey thanks the people for the support, and Eddie Guerrero, who is supposed to not be here, interrupts this moment. Rey tells Eddy that their problem is over, and Rey also tells Eddy to get away from his family. Then Eddie Guerrero says that he's a man who keeps his promises, and that Rey might have beaten Eddy at the Great American Bash, but Eddy never loses.
Nobody beats me porque yo soy la ley!
Eddy then breaks the promise he made to his wife Vicky.
I lied!
Eddy brings a custom book as Rey attempts to cover his son's ears. Then Rey goes up the ramp to confront Eddy, and Eddy drops the bombshell.
Dominic! Rey is not your father! I'm your father, Dominic!
The secret has finally been revealed. Rey returns to console his son Dominic in this emotional segment. Dominic asks his father if this is true, as the broken down Rey tries to tell his son to disregard what Eddy has said, and the young Dominic, troubled with emotion, runs away from his father, escaping through the audience with his father Rey in tow. Then Eddy gets in the ring and proceeds to insult the audience. Eddy then orders Tony Schimmel to bring him a chair, and Eddy proceeds with his awful bedtime story. Eddy goes on to tell the story of the time that Eddy and his wife Vicky got separated because of Eddy's errant ways and demons. Side note, this is actually based in reality. In 2002, Eddy went through substance abuse problems and separated from his wife. And Eddy during this time was in a relationship with a woman named Tara Mahoney, and that relationship resulted in a birth of a child, Kaylee Marie Guerrero. Eddy continues his story, and Eddy says that one of his many one-night passions got pregnant.
I was going a little loco when me and my wife were separated. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Having sex with a lot of different mamacitas. Well, one day, one of these told me that she was pregnant.
And neither Eddy or this fictional woman wanted anything to do with this child. The solution for this problem was to give this unwanted child to Rey, who according to Eddy was shooting blanks, but desperately wanted to have a child with his wife Angie. Eddy then feels relieved to finally tell the story to the world, and Eddy announces more to come the next week on the second chapter of Eddy's bedtime story. On the next SmackDown broadcast, Rey makes his entrance to open the show, in the first edition of Christian's new talking segment, The Peep Show. Christian, the asshole heel, asks Rey,
"Who's your daddy?"
Rey cuts him off, and Rey wants Eddie Guerrero. Christian calls Rey a liar, and Christian introduces Eddy to tell the second chapter of this bedtime story. Eddy is a no-show to the arena audience, and Eddy from the backstage area promotes his new I'm Your Papi t-shirt. Eddy then continues to tell the second chapter of Eddy's bedtime story, as Rey attempts to interrupt, and Eddy tells Rey that Rey needs to mind his manners, and Eddy says that he will finish the second chapter of this bedtime story by the end of this week's SmackDown episode. Christian then blindsides Rey Mysterio with a microphone, delivers his finishing move, the Unprettier, and Rey Mysterio is left laying on the canvas. Theodore Long would take this opportunity to commit Christian for a match. In the main event, Rey Mysterio would be facing Christian. 30 minutes later, in the parking lot, Eddy meets a woman, and Eddy tells this woman that without her, there wouldn't be a chapter 2 for the bedtime story. And moments later, Rey Mysterio is the first one out. Captain Charisma is next, and Rey takes the fight to Christian as soon as Christian gets in the ring. And after a seated senton on Christian, Eddy and the mysterious woman would show up to take a seat in front of the entrance, as the match carries on. Eventually, Rey Mysterio would win this match with a 619, drop of the dime, and pinfall. And after the match, Rey would speak on the microphone challenging Eddy to come to the ring and fight. Eddy refuses Rey's challenge, and Eddy introduces the mysterious woman, and her name is Anna. Eddy says that Anna is going to help Eddy finish chapter 2 of Eddie Guerrero's bedtime story. Anna then takes the bedtime storybook to Rey Mysterio, and Rey is given the choice to read the chapter himself or Eddy will read it for him. Rey opens the book to reveal a legal document regarding Dominik's custody.
The courts have found that I am Dominik's father. Next week, you have to bring Dominic down.
Eddy then tells Rey that if Rey can convince Eddy of Rey's love for Dominik, that Eddy might let Rey keep Dominik. Rey Mysterio then tries to reason with Eddie Guerrero.
Dominic is my son. We had to wait till he was old enough to understand. You know who taught him how to ride his first bicycle? The first words to come out of his mouth were Dad. He called me Dad. When my son broke his arm, I took him to the hospital. I love my son.
Rey begs Eddy to not hurt Dominik further.
And I'm begging you, man to man, don't hurt my son anymore.
Rey drops to one knee, and Eddy, the consummate heel, tells the audience that the woman Anna is not actually the mother of Dominik as implied, but is instead Eddy's lawyer. Eddy continues this madness, and Eddy is committed to take Dominik away from Rey Mysterio. Eddy wants Dominik to carry out the Guerrero legacy, and Eddy warns Rey that the following week,
Dominik comes home to Puppy.
On the next SmackDown broadcast, the Mysterio family will be shown walking backstage, and Eddy is also backstage in a segment with a representative from Child Service. Eddy pleads his case with the social worker.
Just can't stand back and watch this happen anymore. This is my son.
I'm here to observe and ensure that Dominik's best interests are being served.
Next, Eddy brings the social worker to the ring. Eddy cuts a promo showered with Eddy sucks chants, and Eddy tells the audience that this might be the day that Dominik will come to a home filled with honesty and love.
Miss Crabtree here.
Hi.
I'm Mrs. Blader from Family and Child Services.
Oh, Mrs. Blader, thank God you're here.
Then Eddy calls out the Mysterios, and in silence the Mysterio family comes out. Eddy drops to one knee, and Eddy tells Dominik to come to him, his kayfabe real father. Eddy tells the social worker that the Mysterios are infecting Dominik with lies.
Well, you can come to Daddy. You see what they're doing? It's only right that Dominik comes home to me.
Eddy yells at the social worker to do her job. Then Rey Mysterio speaks and attempts to reason with Eddie Guerrero.
Nobody wins here, Eddy.
Eddy tells Rey to look at Dominik and see Dominik's silence as an example and shut up. Eddy's tired of the talk, and Eddy wants his son Dominik. Rey Mysterio then cuts a promo of his life, and Rey Mysterio speaks to Eddy about the pride Rey Mysterio felt for Eddy conquering his demons and becoming the World Heavyweight Champion.
You've beaten every obstacle that has come into your life. You've beaten all the odds. You've beaten addiction, Eddy, and became WWE champion. but you haven't beaten Rey Mysterio.
Eddy resists Rey's narrative for a while because Eddy thinks that winning is hurting Rey and taking Dominic away from the Mysterios. Rey Mysterio tries to convince Eddy that he might break the Mysterio family apart and he might even take Dominic, but there's two things that Eddy can take away from Rey Mysterio:
the love for my son and a victory from Rey Mysterio.
Rey then tells Eddy that if Dominic goes with Eddy, Dominic will always know that Eddie Guerrero was never the wrestler that Rey Mysterio was.
You could never beat Rey Mysterio!
Eddie Guerrero then falls into Rey Mysterio's trap, hook, line and sinker. Eddy then takes his jacket and tries to smile at the social worker. Rey Mysterio then challenges Eddie Guerrero for a match at SummerSlam for the custody of Dominic. Eddy accepts the challenge and Eddy tells Rey that Dominic will come home with Eddy tonight, and at SummerSlam it will be forever. The social worker then tells both Eddy and Rey that because of the dangerous situation happening, Dominic has to go into foster care, thus increasing the emotional overtones of this story. Rey promises his son that Dominic will be coming home soon, and Eddy tells Dominic that after SummerSlam, Dominic will say goodbye to the Mysterios forever. The social worker leaves with Dominic, and on top of the ramp, Dominic waves to Angie and Rey as Eddy grins. On the last show before the epic ladder match for custody of Dominic, Eddy comes out to open the show in his cold, somber look, and Eddy cuts a promo in the shadow of a ladder. Eddy talks about the previous week and Rey's challenge at SummerSlam. The people chant Eddy sucks, and Eddy sells the ladder match for Dominic's custody. Eddy says that he will climb the ladder not because of revenge or because he wants to hurt Rey Mysterio. Eddy is going to climb the ladder for every father that loves his sons. And after that, Dominic will become the greatest Guerrero ever. And at SummerSlam, Eddy vows to make Dominic come home to Papi. 45 minutes later, Rey comes out to wrestle the fitness guru Simon Dean. Dean cuts a promo calling Rey pathetic, and Dean wants to give a discount on Simon's fitness products, while making fun of the family predicament that Rey Mysterio is in. Rey then takes the fight to Simon, defending his family's honor, and Rey beats Simon Dean in 2 minutes and 40 seconds with a 619, drop of the dime and pinfall for the win. Moments later, Eddy talks with Josh Matthews in a backstage segment, vowing to win the custody of Dominic at SummerSlam.
Dominic, he's coming home with his real father, and that's me.
Ahead of the SummerSlam match, Eddy would be in a backstage segment with his wife Vicky, and Vicky would try to reason with Eddy. Eddy would eventually become angry with his wife, and Vicky would be sent away. And 25 minutes later, Eddie Guerrero would be the first to make his entrance. Out of the gorilla position, Eddy appears prepared for a fight as the evil gaze meets the audience. At ringside, young Dominic Mysterio is with the social worker. As Eddy enters the ring, Eddy says hi to Dominic. Rey Mysterio, determined to win against Eddie Guerrero, would make his entrance next, consoling his son before heading to the ring. Eddy would then play mind games with Rey, and Eddy would go to Dominic and play nice with the social worker by shaking Mrs. Crabtree's hand. Eddy and Rey stare at each other, carrying the emotional burden of this match. The bell rings. Punches in the corner, Rey goes face first on the corner turnbuckle and suplex on Rey Mysterio. Eddy Irish whips Rey reverses leapfrog on Eddy, who falls outside. Rey chases Eddy and Rey pays straight into the steel steps. Eddy then takes Rey straight into the ladders on the entryway. Eddy now has the upper hand and Eddy drags the ladder to the ring. Eddy props up the ladder in the middle of the ring, and here comes Rey Mysterio. Springboard dropkick on Eddy, and Eddy falls down violently. Eddy now procures a second ladder, and Eddy uses the ladder to hit Rey. Back in the ring, Eddy pounds Rey counters, and Eddy gets sent to the outside. Both men fight for the second ladder, and Rey, with a baseball slide on the ladder, takes out Eddie Guerrero. Eddy on the outside holding the ladder. Springboard senton with precision on Eddy. Eddy is down and Rey proceeds to climb the ladder towards the briefcase. Rey is too slow to get up the ladder and Eddy shows up and both men fight on top of the ladder, with Eddy taking the upper hand and reaching for the briefcase. Then Rey recovers with some punches to Eddy's stomach and Eddy drives Rey's head into the ladder. Eddy with a sunset flip on Rey and both men fall to the mat. Eddy then closes the ladder and uses it as a weapon on Rey. Rey holds on to the ladder, struggling to get up. Eddy with a dropkick takes Rey Mysterio. Eddy slams Rey on the ladder, Eddy sandwiches Rey between the two ladders, and Eddy sacrifices his back to hurt Rey Mysterio. Eddy then tries to bury Rey with the ladder, and Eddy proceeds to climb towards the briefcase. Rey then pushes his ladder onto Eddy's ladder, and Rey climbs and gets near to punch Eddy. Eddy attempts another sunset flip, and disaster strikes. Both men fall to their doom, managing to escape unscathed from the horrible tumble. Eddy would then set up a ladder on the corner, and as Rey's running towards Eddy, Eddy counters Rey's advance, and Eddy gives an inverted powerbomb on the corner ladder. And now Rey is down, suffering the effects of the corner ladder. Eddy starts to climb the ladder ever so slowly, and young Dominic Mysterio comes to the aid of his fallen father, and Dominic would attempt to shake the ladder, but the ladder fails to move. Eddy catches wind of Dominic's presence, and Eddy attempts to intimidate the young Dominic. Eddy goes full-blown heel on Dominic, and as Eddy coils his hand for a slap, Rey shows up to take the fight to Eddie Guerrero. Irish whip on Eddy into a back body drop, Rey sets up a ladder on the ropes, and after a brawl, Eddy goes face first into the ladder. Eddy is now draped in the ladder and the second rope for the 619. Eddy falls with the ladder on top, and Rey drops the dime on the ladder and Eddy. Rey props up the ladder and starts to climb and attempt to reach for the briefcase. Eddy gives chase, and now Eddy has Rey on his shoulders. Rey manages to counter with a sunset flip power bomb, and Rey takes out Eddy. Both men are down, and Rey channels his remaining strength to attempt to climb the ladder yet again. And as Rey has a grasp on the ladder, Eddy manages to kick the ladder out from under Rey Mysterio, who's left in a precarious situation dangling on top of the ring. Rey falls, Eddy powerbombs Rey Mysterio, Rey's down, and Eddy traps Mysterio again with the ladder as Eddy climbs the ladder towards the briefcase. As Eddy struggles to release the briefcase, Rey musters his strength, and Rey manages to shake the ladder. The tables turn, and now Eddy is dangling on top of the ring. Rey manages to take out Eddy from the skies, and both men are broken down.
Saying, ladies and gentlemen, it was never about. Let's go! Mysterio's got a leg! Get Eddy! Frustrated.
Eddy does his signature offense, the Three Amigos, and for the third amigo, Eddy punishes Rey with a vicious suplex on the unforgiving ladder. Back in the ladder, Eddy is climbing towards the briefcase, and Eddy's wife Vicky shows up to try to put some reason into Eddie Guerrero's mind. Eddy shoos his wife away, and Vicky pushes the ladder, bringing justice to this match. Eddy falls down, and the appreciative Rey Mysterio climbs the ladder towards the custody of his son Dominic. Vicky holds her husband down as Rey manages to grab the briefcase and keep custody of his beloved son. A family reunited, and a happy ending to this story. After the match at SummerSlam, the WWE would button up the story with a cage match. 3 weeks later, in the middle of the SmackDown broadcast, Eddy would finally win over Rey Mysterio, and both wrestlers would then move on to other rivalries. Eddy would be feuding with Batista for the World Heavyweight Championship, and Rey would feud with JBL. Thank you for watching this trip down memory lane regarding the epic rivalry between Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. Leave your comments, suggestions, ideas or constructive criticism in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to press that like button and also subscribe for more future content just like this. Or better, this has been fun, thank you for watching.